Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So I was a Jewish studies major for 4 years. Afterwards, I went to rabbinical school for 5 years, all to be just baseline competent. My first year here at Washington Hebrew. I just wanted to pass for competent, and sometimes I did. And sometimes, where's Todd Perkins? As Todd Perkins knows, my professional development lead my first year at Washington Hebrew, sometimes I wasn't. And I want to tell you about one of those times, because it was right here. We have our podium often here at Washington Hebrew, and it was my first hour-long bar mitzvah tutorial. Now, as Cantor knows, one of the things that we try to do here at Washington Hebrew, and we've been doing this since my first year at the very least, is we take the Torah out, we put it on the podium, and we find the kids' Torah portion, so that a parent can take a picture of that Torah portion, and then they can practice it at home. We just did this, right, Shane? Yeah, there you go. So it was my first year at Washington Hebrew, and it was Parshat Vayechi, which was this week's Torah portion, which I knew is the very end of the book of Genesis. So I scrolled all the way to the book of Genesis, and I couldn't find it. I scrolled back, and I couldn't find it. And I realized in this moment, as I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, I got a 12-year-old boy here whose expectations of who his rabbi is are probably pretty low. And I'm not even meeting those. He's turning to his mom, wondering, like, how do we end up with this guy? Mom's looking at him like, I don't know. And they're just talking to each other. I'm sweating. It's horrible. I'm trying to make small talk. No one's interested. 5 minutes pass. 10 minutes pass. 15 minutes pass. God's honest truth. And I can't find the Torah portion. The rehearsal is over. The next family comes in, and that is my first bar mitzvah tutorial here at Washington Hebrew Congregation. And I tell you this story for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, be nice to first-year rabbis. We are trying so hard just not to mess up. And reason number 2, this week's Torah portion is different. Parshat Vayechi is different. So I want to tell you how you normally find a Torah portion. You normally find a Torah portion by looking where a paragraph ends. Sometimes the next line, often the next line, might be a new Torah portion. So a Torah portion begins with a new line. So you look for a new line. Or if you don't have a new line, it's about 9 spaces. You need at least 9 spaces between when last week's Torah portion ends and the new Torah portion begins. That's how you normally find a Torah portion. It's an open Torah portion. Now, 53 out of 54 Torah portions are open. Parshat Vayechi is stuma. Everybody say that. Stuma, which means it's closed. Means there's no space. And that's why I couldn't find it. It was this huge block of text in the Torah. I want you to imagine yay high, yay wide, just words. It was like finding Where's Waldo, right? Waldo in the middle of this thing, at the beginning of Parshat Vayechi. That's why I couldn't find it. It is stuma, which means what? Closed. So I want to walk you through tonight why Parshat Vayechi is stuma. Why this week's Torah portion is closed. And I'm going to walk you through the rabbinic conversation as to why. Our rabbis teach that Parshat Vayechi is stuma, it is closed, because this is the Torah portion where Jacob closes his eyes for the last time. Who's Jacob? Remind me from last week? Third and final patriarch. We're going to get to Joseph in just a minute. Third and final patriarch. And our rabbis teach that when Joseph dies, the hardship in Egypt begins. So let me backtrack for a moment, because our rabbis have a lot of questions about this. So the children of Israel are now in Egypt. We went because there was a famine. How is it that the children of Israel's hardship began when Jacob dies? And the reason why our rabbis ask this follow-up question is because things were pretty good. Actually, they were great after Jacob dies. Not because Jacob dies, but because after Jacob dies, well, who's in charge? Joseph, Jacob's son. Joseph is not just in charge. He is the most powerful person of the most powerful empire the Bible had ever known up until that point. Joseph was doing great. And if Joseph is doing great, Joseph's brothers are doing great. And their extended families are doing great. We have settled not just in Egypt, which is the most powerful empire on the planet, breadbasket of the world, but we've settled. Joseph has placed us in the land of Goshen. And Goshen is amazing. Everybody just say Goshen so we can say it out. Goshen. Good. Goshen is paradise. It's agriculturally bountiful. It is lush. It is green. There's great rain. There's rivers. It's like the zip code you can't afford. That's Goshen. Great schools, bike lanes, low crime. That's where we were. And the first 54 years after Jacob dies, when Joseph is in charge, we were in Goshen and things were great. And our rabbis continue, they say, even for the next 50 years, for a full century, after Jacob dies, things were not just good, they were great. So back to the question, how is it that our hardship began when Jacob dies? How is it that our hardship begins now in this week's Torah portion? And the answer is from Bereshit Rabbah, which is a compendium of midrash of rabbinic teachings from about 2,000 years ago that I want to read to you as our rabbis continue this conversation. They teach that the children of Israel were trapped in a state of suffering. That when Jacob dies, the children of Israel were trapped in a state of suffering. We were so worried, we were so anxious about the hardship to come that we spent an additional 100 years leading up to it suffering. Do you follow this? We were so worried about the hardship to come that we spent a century leading up to that hardship in Goshen suffering. Now, the reality is, sometimes anxiety does wonderful things for us, right? Wonderful things, right? The reason why you save for retirement is because you want to make sure that there's money on the other side, right? The reason why you eat salad is because you want to make sure that you're healthy on the other side of this, right? The reason why, there was an article in the New York Times. Has anybody here been to another country before? Raise your hands. Terrific, a lot of you. Okay, keep your hands up if you've been to 5 countries or more. Terrific. 10 countries? Okay, so for all of you whose hands are up, have any of you voluntarily gone to Afghanistan? What? Not what I was expecting. So there's an article written for Steve Lamb in the New York Times. Did you see this? On people who go to Afghanistan as tourists. It's a crazy proposition. And I'll spare you the article, but if I had a screen, I'd give you the image. There's an image in this article of some hapless tourist taking a picture with his camera of something over there, and 10 feet away from him is an armed guard with a gun, making sure that this guy doesn't get kidnapped. All of which is to say, if you are traveling to a place where you need an armed guard to make sure you don't get kidnapped, you are going to the wrong place. So the reason why you have not, unless you're Steve Lamb, gone on a tour to Afghanistan is because you are rightfully worried about what could happen to you there, right? Anxiety can do fantastic things for us. The problem is, if you've got enough seichel, if you've got enough common sense not to be a tourist in Afghanistan. I'm sorry, Steve. You're a very smart person, right? Extend that out a little bit, because what I have found in my personal life and in my professional life is sometimes the smarter you are, the more disasters you can see coming down the pike. The smarter you are, the more things you've got to worry about. And the problem is, with enough foresight, all sorts of hardship can be possible. And all sorts of hardship must be avoided, right? The problem with trying to avoid disaster is that not every disaster can be avoided. Is that right? The problem with trying to avoid disaster is you can't do it every time. Anticipating disaster rarely prevents it, isn't that right? Right? Anticipating disaster rarely prevents it. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. Instead, your greatest fears for the future can come and darken an otherwise perfectly wonderful day. There's a great comedian who talked about this. He himself is a liberal, politically a liberal. And he says, the hard part about being a liberal, can I tell you the hard part about being a liberal? I'm going to botch it because I'm not a comedian. He says, you got to make sure the compost is out. And you got to make sure that the bottles and the cans go in the different places. And he said, I walked out of my apartment. And by the way, conservatives have their own tsuris, their own anxieties too. I'm just picking on this guy because he's this comedian and it's a great bit. He said, I walked out of my apartment in New York City and it's this beautiful day, 68 degrees. The birds are chirping. There's not a cloud in the sky. I take a big, deep breath, which you can't often do in New York City. And then he said, and then I realized it was January. And my first thought was climate change stinks. and that's what happens, right? You take this issue, this thing, this very real concern that you have no control over, that there's nothing you can do about coming down the pike or here already. You take your future and you let it darken an otherwise fantastic present. And that's why, even in the land of Goshen, we spent 100 extra years in hardship. Because if you see disaster coming your way, and if all you see is disaster coming your way, the reality is some version of that disaster has already arrived. And so, why are most Torah portions open? Our rabbis ask this question. Why are most Torah portions open? And they say that it's because Moses, who wrote the first Torah, needed some space. He needed some time. And students of Moses, they teach, need some time to stop, to pause, to think. And if you have anxiety coming at you like photons from the sun at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you need time to stop, to think, to pause. And as you are stopping to think and to pause, I want to share with you what I would like that space to be filled with, just for me tonight. Can I tell you the joy, what I am grateful for here in this moment? I am grateful that it is 28 degrees outside, and it's really nice in here. I'm grateful for that. I am grateful, and you should be too, for the health to be here physically tonight in this space. And if you're joining us online, you should be grateful that you have the technology at your fingertips that billions of people around the planet would otherwise kill for. I am grateful that before and after the service, we have hot hors d'oeuvres and a bartender. I'm grateful that Canner Hampshire's back. Right? And my list could keep going and going and going. And I want you on this Shabbat to start your list too. I want to read you a poem to help. Now, this poem, I should say, every rabbi in Cantor I know has some things on their wall, things that mean something to them. I have 5 things on my wall that really only I see. But this is one of them. And if you didn't get a copy, you can get one on your way out. 3 Gratitudes by Carrie Newcomer. Every night, before I go to sleep, I say out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for. All the significant, insignificant, extraordinary, ordinary stuff of my life. It's a small and humble practice. And yet, I find I sleep better, holding what lightens and softens my day ever so briefly at the end of the day. Sunlight and blueberries, good dogs and wool socks, a fine rain, a good friend, fresh basil and wild phlox, my father's good health, my daughter's new job, the song that always makes me cry, always at the same part, no matter how many times I hear it, decent coffee at the airport, and your quiet breathing, the stories you told me, the frost patterns on the windows, English horns and banjos, wood thrush and June bugs, the smooth, glassy calm of the morning pond, an old coat, a new poem, my library card, and that my car keeps running despite all the miles. And after 3 things, more often than not, I get on a roll and I just keep going. I keep naming and listing until I lie grinning, pulling blankets up to my chin, awash with wonder at the sweetness of it all. Awash with wonder at the sweetness of it all. If worry, if anxiety takes up all of that extra space in your life, fill that space with something else. And I say this because you would want this for your child. You would want this for you would want this for your parent. You would want this for the people you love. And I want this gratitude for you. And so I want you to start this Friday night, tonight, as you tuck yourself into bed, say 3 things out loud. And if you have space for 4, add a 4th. And add a 5th too. Create that space in your life for gratitude. And that is the mark of a life well lived. Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos, everyone.